Roland? Okay. Could people please add their names to the agenda doc under attendees, if possible? I just want to remind everybody that we have a code of conduct, so please be excellent to each other. Could I get a volunteer to take notes this morning? Yay, thank you. And then we also need a troll smasher. So anybody feeling like smashing trolls this morning? George? Cool. Let me give you permissions then. Okay. There are no new contributors on the call this morning. So we'll skip through that part of our regular program. Office hours. George, any updates?
No, we're all set for next week. So I think I'll bring it up then. But I am doing a office hours for SIG Windows on Thursday and one for Cluster Lifecycle on Friday. One of them has a major new feature now that they wanted to, interact with the community. So we set that up. And Cluster Lifecycle is going to be, they wanted to have a session that was like, how do we onboard new users? So we're just going to record it and make it an office hours so we could reuse it because we figured that'd be useful. So that will mostly be just Tim talking and us recording them.
Great. Meet our contributors, Paris.
I'm sorry, are you on to me? Jeff,
Yes.
I'm talking my ear off.
I'm sorry.
Yes. So let's see, meet our contributors. It is going to be an awesome month in April. I was just telling them that we have I'm going to write this down too. We have a Cube Control code base tour in one of the hours. And then we also are going to have a bunch of other tours, TBD, in the afternoon as well. But I already have 4 people locked in for each session. So we're pretty good. I'm super pumped about that one. That'll be like our pre-KubeCon Barcelona meet our contributors that will rock out. But that's it.
Great. Community meeting, George.
Lockie will be our guest host. He is all set, and we're basically all set past KubeCon. So great job, everyone.
Beautiful. Okay. Need to know chair's email. Paris.
So does anybody have anything that they want to get sent out for chairs or tech leads this week other than anything related to Barcelona Contributor Summit? I mean, that's my reoccurring. George?
Yeah, I had a chair ask me about surveys, how we get those. So maybe a reminder on, the usual ping ehor, whatever the actual process is. I think that's either a mail or a ticket. I don't remember offhand. Basically, reminder, you could get a survey if you want chairs.
Yep. And it might be worth mentioning that we're full up on the SIG face-to-face rooms. So if any of the SIGs missed their opportunity, they have indeed missed that opportunity.
Okay. Anything else?
Do we have a SIG face-to-face thing?
No.
No.
Okay.
Where everyone's involved in helping with it.
Yeah. If y'all want to get together, I mean, I'll pick a restaurant we can eat. Anything else? Last call for chair and tech lead email. Aaron, you don't have anything? Aaron's got the thinking face on right now.
I feel like I'm still kind of catching up on scroll back on literally all the things, but I feel like I want to tell people to remove their slow tests from the blocking suite. But since I don't have anything to point them to or a guide or anything, I'm going to hold off on that.
All right. Well, we'll hit you up next week. All right. Well, that's it. And I've got plenty of filler to add. So that's it for the email.
Okay. Which takes us down to the contributor summit. Jonas, Josh, and Paris.
Howdy. Let me just, yep. I'm trying to find the document. Here we go. So we're working on an outline for the content. Gwen and Tim will bring that back to us on April 22nd with an overview for input and help and things like that. So making sure that the content is up to date and correct and things like that for the workshops. Dawn, you mentioned that the SIGs are full now, which is awesome. So we have 12 SIGs. That is correct, Dawn, right?
We have 11 SIGs, and Josh
11, thank
wanted
you.
a release team meeting. So,
Yeah.
so it's kind of release SIG related, I suppose, but it's a little bit different.
We'll call it 11 and a half.
Yeah.
So we got a bunch of people there, which is really awesome. So thank you so much, Dawn, for driving that. We will be sending out a bunch of emails for the contributor workshop attendees, for all the volunteers that are speaking, volunteers that are helping out and things like that. We are also finalizing some swag tomorrow with Deb and George, so that's going to be really, really fun. And that's about it right now.
Okay, great. Let's go jump over to the project board then. Share my screen. Make it a little bigger. Okay, let's go through the blocked column. Let's start out with update SIG XAML with more working group info. Christoph.
I think that's almost done.
It's
Actually, no?
I mean, PRs were created, but then they haven't merged all of them. So I just bumped them yesterday.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I saw
So-
you bump them. That's all I was
Yeah,
thinking.
I haven't seen what are the updates on the PRs.
Okay. Yeah, right now we're waiting for I guess it's like what chairs to approve the fact that they're affiliated with the working group.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the update there. We're good. You can actually move that out of blocked and into in progress too, if you'd be so kind. That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Rename release note and cherry pick labels to conform to the category subcategory norm.
No updates.
Okay. No worries.
Sorry. I probably French shows one now. Still blocked?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
still blocked. Yeah.
Okay. And then sub-project details in SIG XAML.
So, Aaron, do you want to speak about this?
I actually don't have context right now. If you can help me out.
So I do know that we mentioned the contact, like Slack details for sub projects. Do we need anything else? I'm just not sure about that. And I think that needs to come from steering, so maybe it's still blocked.
Should we take it today if it's blocked?
Yeah.
I think we are unblocked. And now that you've given me that context, I feel like we attempted to talk about sub-projects having leads or chairs or something, and then there was much pontification, and we decided if a sub-project just has a Slack channel, a mailing list, and they can have their own meetings, then we're happy.
So can we close this?
I feel like we probably can.
Okay.
I'll make a comment, rah steering or something. I don't know.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Do you want to move this over to completed or hold off for a little bit?
Could you put it back into in progress for me?
Sure.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Which now takes us into the open mic portion of our meeting. Does anybody have anything that they would like to discuss?
I put a card on the backlog column about the owner's file. Do you want to talk about it?
Wait, owner's file?
The
Yeah. Sorry, I was writing down a note. So lately it's been brought up a couple times now on auditing and grooming of the owner's files. It's been a long-standing issue for a while. It came up on Twitter DIMS created an issue not too long ago with some of the people that haven't been active for, no activity in dev stats for a year, and people that should be pruned. And was sort of tossing around the idea of like an emeritus status or something like that for reviewers and approvers, people that aren't, they might have some activity but not a lot of activity, but are still a good, point of reference. Like, if you need a subject matter expert, they're still there in the owner's file, just commented out, so that you could, essentially CC and get an opinion on them. And there seems to be a good amount of backing around the idea right now, so I might try and push forward with that idea and at least grooming out people that haven't been active for a year sooner rather than later.
So is there, is there a PR or an issue?
It's an issue right now.
Okay.
There's been a couple of issues that have been, like one in test infra and a couple in community. And I think just trying to bring everything together.
I feel like most people that I talk to in this group right now are totally cool with emeritus approvers and reviewers and the concept of it. I mean, why don't we just do a poll against the community membership guidelines and talk about emeritus status and talk about like what the changes we want to see, and then get them in front of like chairs and leads and start kind of the conversation that way.
So we'll need to add that like an emeritus field to the approvers plugin in Prow, and I don't think that's feasible right now.
Yeah, at least going by the thread and testing for that, like they didn't necessarily want to add that right now, but
was there a reason? Aaron's on the line too.
The plugin has grown organically, and it needs some refactoring before we can make big changes.
What I would suggest, at least, I wouldn't say like a stopgap, but something to go for now, is just to comment them out with a note about it. It's been done several times in several owners files, just like comment out the person with like emeritus status and a date.
Would we be able to like catch that if we decide to go through the other route, like meaning like the people that we've commented out? Would we be able to like go back and like change them to like official emeritus status once we have that?
Yeah.
Just like remove the comment.
Yeah,
that would work.
Yeah.
I see George has his hand raised.
Yeah, I was gonna say, does it need to be in the owner's file like at all? Or why, like, I'm asking, like, why touch the tooling one? I just say put them as emeritus in your README, and then that way we don't have to.
This is more so for specific like owners files that are all over the place, and like I think there's 450 owners files in KK, and when you're looking for, again, like someone that does have more knowledge in the specific area that you want to get an opinion on, just being able to look at the owner's file and see like, hey, this person was previously an approver in here. I'm a little unsure. Let's look for an opinion.
And another additional behavior would be if they're an emeritus status, PRs won't get assigned to them because chances are they're not going to respond because they're not that active. But if you're not getting any action from any of the other owners that got assigned, you can then potentially have other people you can ping.
Okay.
I'll have to. Go ahead, Aaron. Now, I have the least amount of context whatsoever, so I feel like you're probably going to be more constructive.
Dude, I've been gone for a while. I have just been in contact. So I would like for us to figure out what the value is on the emeritus status. Like what are we trying to convey here? Because there's a couple of different things we could possibly be conveying. Who is an expert in this code, in this piece of code? Who has approve rights for this piece of code? Or just like a hat tip, like this is cool. You did this thing once upon a time and you should somehow get credit for it, but like we need to take you out of the active path. Those three, we can do those three different things in three different ways. I don't think, to inject my opinion into there, I don't think that we need to mess around with a plugin and add a new specific field that continues to have approved rights. Because the truth is, if somebody hasn't been active in a code base in a while, they shouldn't be approving in that code base anyways. From a code owner standpoint, if you're inactive, you're inactive. You shouldn't be approving in that code base anyways. And the person who is in the owner's file would likely defer anyways to somebody else who does have more recent experience with that piece of the code, because we're moving so fast. So I don't think we need to mess around with the plugin. It would be like, is it worth just pruning the owner's files? And it's like, if you're inactive, just remove you from the owner's file. The owner's file is supposed to be reviewer and approver rights, and find some other way to hat tip to people that you've done a thing. Or is it just friction wise, is it easier to just comment it out and leave something in there? I don't know. I think, but the one thing I do have an opinion on is I personally don't feel a strong need for us to go messing around with the automation.
I mean, I definitely think at the very least we should do a comment in the owner's file that there was at one point someone else that did a lot of work here. I just feel like that, just from a maintainer perspective, is just super nice.
The other thing, that this is more so the bit of the social aspect. I did a random polling of a bunch of people in the owner's files, and there's a good chunk of people that are in there that wouldn't necessarily qualify as voters, but they're still sort of the experts in that area. And I would say, those would be ideal candidates, are people with minimal activity to bump over to emeritus, where essentially things are queuing up, and they aren't things are just waiting for them to review or approve. Bump that along, but again, it's still there just as a reference so that they can, you can see an opinion from them if you need to.
Josh has the same views.
So speaking from a purely social concern and from having done something analogous to this in another project, one of the problems that you have with moving inactive committers out of the active committer file is that a few of them, when they find out that's about to happen, they put up a fight. Basically, they're like, "Oh, I'm not really inactive. I've done X, Y, and Z," or they have a brief burst of activity for a week and then they disappear again. And if all you're doing is moving them from one section of the file to another, you're a lot less likely to get a fight. And that was why we actually created an emeritus status in another project, was specifically so that people wouldn't try to hold on to their committer bit when they weren't using it.
That's more or less what I was trying to get at with the whole idea.
It's more people engineering than technical engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and the other nice thing is, if you're not worried about people putting up a fight, then you can even automate it, right? If we have sufficient automation, we can say, hey, anybody who meets this criteria gets automatically moved from the owners to the emeritus section of the file. And that even decreases the amount of work we have to do, and it decreases the amount of arguing with people we have to do, because we'll say, well, get proud, or not proud. The other thing we use to manage GitHub did it, right? And it's according to these rules.
Okay, I agree with all y'all are saying. I actually don't understand why it would be. Yeah, I feel like adding an emeritus field that doesn't get parsed by our tooling at all is fine. And I agree with the hat tip. I agree with the making it easier to ask somebody to step down. When you start talking about having the bot automatically do things, you are kicking the hornet's nest of, we actually need to document our policies and codify them very concretely and specifically, and then get people to agree on that. And I feel like you're going to run into some challenges there when people talk about what the significance of being a reviewer or what being an approver is, and the whole question of status of being in an owner's file anyway. So my only ask is that, if you look to move people from one section to another because, look, it's obvious they just haven't done anything in a while, I agree with you, but it would be really helpful if you set things up so this is done in a recurring manner, or other people can very quickly see the dashboard or the report. If it's just a one shot, I don't think that's super productive.
No, this hasn't actually been documented in like a GitHub issue or email thread or anything like that. But we were talking about like again, possibly like twice a year or something like that, some sort of recurring thing to sort of go through and look at it with all of this.
Christoph had a Sanders.
Yeah, so I was looking at this previously in a slightly different context and then realized how big it was and then put it at the bottom of the pile. The context I was looking at this in was pruning our org members, because we have nearly 900 org members. And the thing about org membership that's more concerning to me is that's tied to GitHub Teams, which is tied to actual commit bits as opposed to that's tied to actual commit bits as opposed to like owner's file privileges and going through our bot, which there'd still be like layered approvals and that kind of stuff. Having like actual right to repos allows you to override things and manually add labels and do all sorts of nasty stuff that people, if somebody like lost access to their account or something, that would be bad. So pruning back inactive people from our org is definitely something that we want to do. Maybe we tie these two processes together. Like if you go inactive from the org and you get pruned out from the org, that's the thing that keys us up to go into owners files and go, okay, we're moving you to emeritus status and all those owners files. You still get the hat tip of being in the owners file, but your actual privileges get pruned back from org membership. The tricky bit there is org membership is definitely more of a status symbol to people, no matter how we try and curve it. Being in the org and having little Kubernetes logo on your GitHub profile is more of a status symbol to people than being in an owner's file. So I think we'll get more people fighting on that one than necessarily owner's file stuff.
So what's next steps?
Try it out and see how much wailing and gnashing of teeth you run into.
I think
So,
I think before trying it out, what we should do is document some sort of a policy, going back to what you said.
So do a PR against the community membership markdown file and talk about emeritus status and like how you get it and how we apply it.
Yeah, back to what you said earlier.
Cool.
So then, for like the emeritus status, are we just going with the comment on the owner's file?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I think that's the best
I same
option
here.
too.
And we can always put, you can always put a to-do in the community membership doc that says, very work in progress. This is our first attempt or something like that.
We don't do strict marshaling on YAML, so you could literally add a new section to the owner's file and just, we don't parse it.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion as well. I feel like that's better because other tooling could report on the emeritus field without our tooling having to rely on it.
I'm all for that.
Go team.
And then if we establish a policy and set something for like what the emeritus status looks and try it out in like a repo on an owner's file and like scope it really small, then we can expand that out to be like, okay, on that same cadence, we're going to go and pull back org membership. If you've been inactive for a year across the org, then we're going to pull back your org membership as well, and then keep going from there.
Should we start with
the one other thing I would add, like when I was looking at this that I didn't have enough time to dig into, is we need to set what that bar is for activity. So ensuring that we have accurate, like we have a set bar, we understand what activity is, things like that are being mentioned in chat, like does commenting on an issue, does working a project board, does what is it that we're qualifying as activity, and then ensuring that we're getting that accurate data from our source, in this case, DevStats. But the report that we're pulling ensures that we're capturing all of that activity into our inactivity process.
Josh?
Okay, so wait, we went from moving people to emeritus status, whatever that means, in owners files, to now deleting people's org memberships, which from my perspective is a very different thing. So I don't understand the rationale of why we want to remove people's org memberships due to inactivity. I thought the whole purpose of the org membership was we verified that somebody is a real person and not a bot or a hacker. And that doesn't change if they haven't been active.
So org membership, so from my perspective, number one, I'm saying that we should stage this out. Like step one, owners files. Don't do the org membership. Don't go straight for the org membership. Step one, go for the owners files. And then see what kind of like wailing and gnashing we get from that, and then be able to move and incorporate the org membership into it. Org membership and pulling that back, org membership is a privilege, right? Like it is tied back to actual system privileges. So number one, just getting org membership allows you to LGTM anything in the org. It allows you to run tests, just like what all of our CI tests and that kind of stuff, your tests will auto run. It gives you certain privileges to be an org member. And then on top of that, there's also like group memberships. So if you're in, if you have write access to repos, if you have read access to repos, if you have admin access to repos, those are things that would get pulled back if we approve your org membership. If you're not using, if you have rights and you're not using them for a year, you don't need the rights. And like, if somebody leaves and comes back, I'm fine with them coming back. But if you're gone for a year, you don't need your rights anymore if you're not actually using the bits that you have.
I personally feel like that's a hill not worth dying on for what it's worth. I hear you, but I don't see a ton of risk that outweighs the goodwill and benefit we get by continuing to keep it as some kind of status thing. Another thing I want to throw out there in general, but at this point, I think we're maybe blowing scope. Like, I eventually want to live in a world where the owner's files basically just call out to GitHub teams, and then use file-based management of GitHub teams. So that way, I feel like SIGs could more consistently have a consistent set of people applied all across the org, as opposed to having to maintain sundry owners files scattered in arbitrary directory trees and whatnot. So I wouldn't want to overthink this too much. We may eventually, like maybe each sub-project has its own group of approvers, reviewers, and emeritus, and those are represented as GitHub teams instead of living inside of an owner's file or something. So just a thought. Like, I don't want owners files as they exist today are really unfriendly for people to manage because they list a lot of very specific usernames. It's really good if you want to go stalk people, because the people who are assigned to your PR usually aren't responsive for whatever reason. It does annoy me when I have to like realize there's an alias and then go look at the owner's alias file in the correct repo and then read the list of names in there and then go figure out who I have to ping for my PR. I feel like the use of GitHub teams will solve that problem. And again, this wouldn't be like assigning to a GitHub team and expecting somebody to magically appear out of the void, because assigning to a group of people still means it's uncertain who within that group of people is responsible for it. It's about like doing the indirection and actually resolving that GitHub team to a list of people and then choosing people out of that team. Anyway, I'm off topic at this point.
So what did we decide was our next step on this?
A document proposal for, or I don't know, open a PR against the community membership thing and add emeritus and then see what happens.
Okay.
Because I personally feel like, you tell me, sometimes I feel like it is an unsolved question in some people's heads whether contributor experience owns that or whether the steering committee owns that. Like, what is an approver and what is a reviewer and what is emeritus and why should we be moving people from one thing to another, so on and so forth.
Paris, what do you think about this?
I see lots of talking in that room off mic.
I think it's great. It's something that I suggested 10 minutes ago, and we just bike shed it on this. So cheers.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to discuss today? Nope. Okay then.
Wait.
Okay, George.
Oh,
I know we have a charter conversation.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So originally I was expecting to just go over it line by line with Christoph, but I wasn't, because I was expecting y'all to be all, I don't know, Google Next thing or whatever. So I was thinking just like opening the text editor and then we could go through it, kind of hash it all out, because the diff I'm finding kind of unreadable right now. And I really want to make sure that, like, I don't know, we take the time to like have a thorough discussion and do all that stuff. So I have my other machine joined so that I could share.
Yeah. Before we do this, can I give a 60-second update on Shanghai,
Sure.
which I did not get the chance to do earlier?
Yep, it'll take me a while to figure out Zoom anyway.
Okay. So currently we have the Shanghai, the English version of the Shanghai Contributor Summit application written up. It's out for translation with the CNCF translators. We do have a bit of a problem that we're going to need to figure out at the meeting tomorrow, where it's problematic to figure out a place people can attract a lot of inappropriate applicants. Because we're really hoping for the Shanghai Contributor Summit to not screen applicants, because that's significantly harder in China than it is elsewhere. But we told Linux Foundation Asia, we don't want to have just a checkbox in the registration form, and so they set up a whole separate event, which is now on their homepage. And I'm like, that's going to attract a lot of people who shouldn't be there. So we're working on that. We're going to work on that with the CNCF and that sort of thing. But and as soon as we can get that up, then we're also going to be looking to obviously attract some people for current contributor content, although something much smaller than Barcelona.
Okay. Sounds good. George, are you ready to roll?
Yep. Okay. Is anybody not up to speed on this or have like really strong opinions?
ELDR, you want to break out all user-facing stuff to a different SIG, and you want to rescope the current SIG to just contributor-facing stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I get the feeling that people were generally nodding, but for specific each issues, I think we need to go down and like figure out exactly what's in scope and what isn't out of scope, so I can make it more explicit. So the reason I wanted to like tighten this up is like the original charter was like not detailed enough in each of the specific things, and then we end up doing things just because they don't have a home anywhere else.
I mean, I disagree, but okay.
I mean, let's talk about it then. Like,
yeah. I mean, I feel like we did a lot of this out of scope. The only thing, like I said in the email, is like the fact that we staff this stuff is what is out of scope. And like what is user facing and what isn't is necessarily not drawn out on there either.
Yeah. So that's what I want to figure out, is what is user facing and what it isn't.
I mean, I consider that anything that a majority of users are on versus contributors.
Sure. So what exactly, like, what don't you like about this, I guess is my question. Like, I
guess just because it's like you took out a lot of stuff and we can just take out one bullet.
Like which bullet, like specifically? Because like
the one that's talking about, like, we could take out the words wherever it says staff, either staff or staffing right there. Ownership, staffing, moderation of Kubernetes communication properties. Like this one, that line can be revised. Okay. But at the top, you're like trying to take out establishing guidelines and stuff like that. But I feel like we should still establish guidelines and best
That's,
practices.
but okay, so I think we're confused because specifically what I'm doing is making Contribax being the one that established like the guidelines, the procedures, and all that stuff.
And that's what we had in the original. Look, read the first bullet. The first bullet specifically, like, can you put the diff up?
Yeah, 1 second. Hold on.
Like the first bullet specifically says establish policies, procedures, guidelines.
Sure. I just broke it out into more specific, like I mentioned each of the specific properties as opposed to the.
Can we actually, as a starting point, pull up our current charter as opposed to the proposed one?
Can someone do that? Because I can't share two things. It's like, if we toggle back and forth, I think that would be useful. Yeah.
Yeah. 1 second.
It stopped sharing, right?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I just did an upgrade on this machine. I just wanted to.
I'm losing my room. I might be back if I can find another one.
All right.
Okay. Service experience charter.
I'll drop the link in the chat. There we go.
Can you see my screen? Think.
Yep.
Okay. So this is currently what we have on our charter for in scope. So
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right now, establish policies, standards, and procedures for the use, moderation, and management of all public platforms officially used by the project. So maybe we clarify which ones we actively moderate and which ones we don't, but policy, standards, and procedures for use, I think, is definitely in scope for us. Thoughts?
So I would say I would love to see a future where this user's SIG, or whatever we're going to call it, can participate equally with us in defining those policy standards and procedures. Right. But until that exists, I don't think we should, ahead of time, discharge that responsibility. If later we can share it, that's great, but it's still in scope for us. We would just be participating in the creation of those instead of being the only group defining them.
I agree with all of those things, yes.
And that's only a possible future. It's the possible future I want, but
Is there any tooling or moderation responsibilities, like other than Slack, that we've definitely identified? Is there anything that we specifically are looking to divest of?
There's a bunch of things that I would like to put on there, but I'm not sure if I would get consensus on that.
But I'm curious to hear what those are. Like, what are we doing that we don't want to be doing anymore? And you are definitely a part of that, George.
Sure. So one of them, I think, that you glanced on in the mailing list, that's easy, is since we've only ever had 2 comments or whatever on the YouTube channels, then we can just turn off comments and leave things as is. Because we bumped up the amount of YouTube moderators up a bunch, like when we did the proposal, but there's like really no need. People don't really use our YouTube to like chat and comments and stuff. So there's that. I feel like we have way too many mailing list responsibilities that we could just push down to the SIGs. So if you're a SIG lead, you should be in there, and then the other owners of the list should be the CNCF people.
We've tried that.
What do you mean we tried that?
We've tried a world where SIG chairs and tech leads were the owners of their own mailing lists.
Uh-huh.
And that's what got us the mess that we're in now. So in the case where we need them to globally change a policy or a setting on their mailing lists, getting them to do so without us having any kind of direct involvement is
sure.
And it's the same as Zoom. It's the consequence of having a decentralized governance. And I think
could we split that mechanism portion from the content portion so that the SIGs own the content on their list, but contributor experience make sure that the list is set up sane?
That's kind of what we do now.
Is it documented properly?
I mean, we don't moderate their list. Like, in the mailing list guidelines, we say that we don't moderate your lists, that we're only here to help you in times of, like, if y'all are like on a plane and there's spam and like, you know, there's nobody has access now to the list from an ownership perspective, and we need to give access to other people. So I mean, we're just kind of like there as a fail safe. And also as a way to, like, make sure that everybody collectively is doing what they're supposed to be doing.
So aside from the most common space like KDev, George, was there one where you were seeing a problem?
Yeah, so KDev I think absolutely falls in our thing because that's used by the whole project or whatever. But for a lot of these things, it's like, well, the SIGs aren't doing these things, so contributor experience should go around and make sure that their mailing list, their Zoom and stuff are set up right. What I want to ask and get the conversations going is, if a person is a SIG chair and has certain responsibilities, then they should have those responsibilities. It shouldn't be on us to, like, babysit 40, because it's impossible. Like, we've been trying to fix the Zoom moderation things for, like, over 6 months. And this whole go to every SIG and make sure they all check each box doesn't feel scalable to me. I feel like there's like a ask that we can say, you know, being a SIG chair is important, and there are duties that you have, and you have to do your due diligence, you know, just kind of banking on contributor experience to be there to do all your stuff. Now, we'll be happy to give you best practices, documenting the process of all the stuff that you need to do to get your list all set up. You know, oh, maybe I am going on a plane and I need someone from Contribex to help me out for a minute. I think that's all fine, but just defaulting to, oh, okay, well, we'll just have, you know, put all the SIGs in a for loop and have George check all their check boxes doesn't feel contributor experience to me.
Well, I mean, I feel like that's our role. We are here for the contributor and their experience, and a part of that process is their communication pipelines. And
sure, and I agree. I just think it should be more towards, you know, our mentorship
and they
program.
are. And I mean, that's why I feel like that's why we're making progress and towards G Suite and trying to think of like a holistic strategy here on how we're going to combine all of these properties and create an experience that's more enriching for our contributors. And like the way to do this is to like figure out what's wrong with it. And we have, and like, again, that's why we're doing the G Suite stuff. That's why we're like taking these measures to try to make this better, because we're saying that this currently isn't working.
Sure. And I don't disagree with any of that.
Centralized ownership over some of this stuff, like maybe it would be better. And I'm saying maybe because we just don't know yet.
Yeah. And like, so I don't disagree with any of those things. I just think the question should be steering/CNCF. What would it take to staff someone doing all of this stuff, which is important. It needs to get done. I don't want to say that it's not important, but like, we have major programs, I think, that we could be really spending our time on instead of.
I mean, I feel like CNCF would just sound like we have a meta problem getting new contributors. Like, why are we not growing other people into these roles?
I don't know. I would have a hard time convincing someone that moderating a mailing list for an open source project is a great role and you're going to have a good time.
We
only do it because we have to.
We were able to get the CNCF to hire somebody to work full-time in SIGDocs because it is well known what SIGDocs workload is. Could we hand CNCF a description of like, look, we need this from you? But I'm not necessarily saying that requires that we change our charter. I don't have it. It was literally, I don't have any of the context, but like.
I want to go after
wanna
you,
be-
Christoph. Christoph has his hand up, so I want to make sure he.
So I know from in an ideal world, I would agree with you, George. In an ideal world, I would absolutely agree that hey, so you're a SIG lead. Here's your list of responsibilities. Here's the things that you have to do.
Mhm.
But number one, we have no enforcement mechanism. It's not like we can say, hey, you're not doing your responsibilities. You're not a SIG lead anymore. Get out.
Right.
We can't. We don't have an enforcement mechanism. Ultimately, making sure that those experiences and those communication channels for our contributors does end up falling to us.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're going to ultimately be a backstop no matter what. So doing whatever we can do to make our lives easier, whether that's central management, whether that is some other plan, whatever we can do to make our lives easier, absolutely behind. I think either strategy, I think it is valuable to say hey, if we have a volunteer workforce that wants to go and moderate mailing lists, if we have a volunteer workforce that wants to go and maintain our Zoom, if we have either volunteers or we have companies stepping up, especially the big companies stepping up with community managers to do that kind of stuff and pay somebody to do it, great. If it's not happening, then we need to define it and we need to get the CNCF in here to do it. And because those jobs still need to be done one way or another, and putting those, if I'm a code owner, if I'm a SIG lead, a repo owner, somebody with some sort of responsibility, I want to be focused on my code. I want to be focused on the health of my SIG. I want to be making sure that things are healthy in that SIG, as opposed to following documentation for, the latest Zoom setting that I need to change. That isn't what I'm interested in. And I know that's not what, if I'm in that position and I'm getting paid by my employer to contribute code, that's not the thing that my employer is going to be happy. How long did you spend today reading up on the new Zoom guidelines or what have you, right?
Yeah. So I am totally fine with throwing this entire PR away if you all feel that we can do this without a charter modification. That's fine. The only thing I want to do is ask steering to ask CNCF basically this. There's a bunch of stuff that's important. It's user facing, but it's not really contributor experience. A lot of it is grindy stuff. Similarly to how they sponsored a SIG docs person, because Chris is going to come back with we don't hire people to be moderators. So I think the ask I would like to ask of CNCF is, what would it take to fund a person to lead, a planning to build a community around this user-facing stuff, right? Someone who's not just doing the day-to-day stuff, but setting up a program for people who are interested in doing this kind of stuff or whatever. What would it take? Do we need more platinums? Do I need to ask for more money? And then as that person sets up that thing, we look at things say Slack. There's some things that would be responsible for us and some for them, right? And then we would just move that in place. So that's kind of my idea there.
So I would like to separate the two different things that we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. There is the grindy, moderation-y type work for things like mailing lists and Zoom, mm-hmm. that are us. Their contributor experience. We're not going to get away from them. We maybe need more help, but that's not a new SIG. That's us. And we will have to deal with that one way or another, and separate that from a different SIG that's user groupy. Right now, literally the only thing that I've heard that to me is clear has a user group focus is Slack. Outside of that, and please, if I'm misunderstanding, please somebody clarify, but that's the only thing that I'm hearing that is 100%, this is definitely has a user focus component, as opposed to, no, this is really actually Contribex and we just need more help.
Discourse and Reddit are both under there as well.
I put Reddit under a cross-cutting thing, at least in my PR. It's like external communications
We don't
platforms
own
that
Reddit.
not control, but might have some
Reddit
influence.
Yeah,
over.
Reddit has been out of scope for us the entire time,
Is-
and so is Twitter.
Yeah, is anyone here actually a moderator on Reddit?
No.
Does Reddit even say it adheres to the CNCF?
Yeah,
Code of
no, it
conduct?
does.
Tim Hawken is an admin on the
Tim
Reddit.
Hawken.
So if we wanted to take over the Reddit officially, we could, like we being the project. If like the user group focus wanted to take over the Reddit and have it be like an official forum for Kubernetes stuff under user group, we could, but we don't have that right now. Discuss, I agree with that. Like discuss, for as much as we've wanted to push it to be like contributor focused as well, I have not at least seen that uptake. Most of the discussion still happens on mailing lists right now. So
Yeah.
like sharing discuss with a user group, that makes sense to me too.
Yeah, I mean, it explicitly is only user stuff right now. We have contributor stuff on there, but like we didn't tell SIGs you have to move or any of that stuff. So, but yeah, but mostly like the grindy stuff, like the Zoom stuff, all of that is like what I'm considering like stuff that should be managed.
Okay.
I don't know. And then the enforcement thing I think is like I don't know.
I mean, with my steering hat on, I'm going to say, if you're going to ask us to go ask the CNCF resources, we're going to ask for a crisply defined statement of work. So that's what the CNCF is going to ask for.
Yeah.
The way they operate is by either hiring contractors or hiring vendors. And so we can't just say, please solve our problem. We actually kind of have to have a pretty well-defined thing. I see Paris saying a lot of words on mute.
No, I'm just talking about how I gotta get out of here. That's all.
Okay. All right. So what do we want to do? Like, do we have any consensus on anything, or?
I feel like our consensus is Slack, and that's about it.
I think the next steps are still figure out how to define. I keep calling it a SIG, even though it may be a user group or whatever, but some way to get a formal organization that is in charge of at least user support. Get that group in place. Once that group is in place, we can figure out its charter, and then that will, I think, inform what we take off our plate.
So I don't understand why everybody thinks that's in scope for us, because it explicitly says, because someone called me out on it, and I looked in last time, and I looked in steering's charter, and like I don't think it's our role to like have to find a home for this stuff. I'm not saying unplug it under night, but
I agree.
Steering help is kind of what I want to do.
You're not wrong, but practically speaking, if we don't do it, it is unlikely to happen. And if that means that, like, you know, some of us have to do something outside of the context of Contribex, I don't want to sign anyone up for work, because I've been trying to do this and haven't succeeded in finding the time. But like, practically speaking, I don't think steering will actually make this happen.
Okay.
We need to at least scope what we're handing back. So if it's Slack and we're saying like, this half of Slack is us, this half of Slack is not us, and we need a home for it. We had the baseline need to do something like that and define like where that line is between the two, so that we can go back to steering and say like, this is what we're handing back. This really is out of scope for us, and this needs to go somewhere else.
All right. We still have
But
two
again,
more
I think
things.
that should definitely be a different conversation than the other stuff around mailing lists and Zoom and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, it sounds like we still have a lot of discussion on this, and we still have two more things on the agenda. So let's go ahead and table this until next week. Josh, do you want to talk about the new application for joining the release team?
I thought I talked about that last week. No?
Am I looking at the wrong week? Oh, I am.
Okay.
Never mind. Okay. Sorry.
It's not
I'm
new.
super out of it today.
Not talking.
Apologies. Tossing that back over, we still have those 5 minutes if we want to figure out the path forward.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand how we came to like, well, if no one's going to do it, we're going to do it. And then we know that it's not working out, like it's not scaling properly. That doesn't feel like a sustainable strategy to me, right? Where it's like, well, we're going to end up, if you join the SIG, you're going to end up moderating mailing lists, and that's just how it is. Like,
well, mailing lists are us, right? And again, like separating those two discussions, mailing lists are us. They've always been us. Like mailing lists and communication channels for contributors are part of contributor experience.
And we don't actually moderate the mailing lists, so so I don't know what work like you feel like you've been like bogged down with as far as mailing list moderation.
it's not just not being it's not the issue about being bogged down.
I mean, we're just
why
using
is that in scope for us in the first place, I guess is my question. Like,
because we care
if someone is a SIG lead and they're owning their mailing list and there's a CNCF owner, like why even involve us? I mean, except for like Kubernetes dev and stuff. I'm talking about like SIG mailing lists and stuff. Like I feel like in general, like just having the SIGs be in charge of their own little infrastructure would.
I mean, they are
available.
Right now, they effectively, by policy, they are.
They are.
In practice, there may be some stuff that and we should identify this. If we are going and modifying like settings on the mailing list, if we're going and modifying stuff, if we should probably be tracking that so we know when we're going in, what we're modifying, and what, not only are we defining the policies, but actually going in and enacting them. But technically, as far as the content on the list, that should be and has been always the SIG.
Yeah, always.
Okay, so
I mean, the only thing I've ever done to help SIGs on their mailing list is to add other owners for new chairs and delete some spam that I see immediately. That's it.
All right. So just as another example, so what am I doing with this card then that I got assigned for the Zoom permissions for each of the SIG accounts?
Because that is a code of conduct issue about the safety of our Zoom meetings. And I feel like the contributor experience should care about the safety of our contributors, and therefore we need to have chairs turn on so many settings that unfortunately the global account cannot handle. And this is, again, a part of the problem with decentralization is we can't turn on some of these controls at a global level. So now we have to go to SIGs and tell them to do it and hassle them to do it. So yeah, this is a pain part of the problem that we have that we should figure out how to solve. Not necessarily saying like CNCF should do it or whatever. I just think that that is a solvable issue. But unfortunately, we have to do some retrofitting.
I'd agree with that. Like if we've got toil that we can eliminate, we should. But it's still communication channels for contributors seems to me very clearly in scope and our responsibility.
Okay.
So I think at this point we take it back to the mailing list and we kind of, I think we should definitely separate those two things. Maybe scope down, if we're going to do something charter-wise, scope it specifically to Slack.
Well, if the consensus is that we're responsible for those things then we're not.
I don't think that's a fair characterization, George. Like I think everyone has agreed that there are elements of Slack that we shouldn't own anymore. That happened organically and accidentally. Similarly, Discuss happened organically, but that those should be owned by somebody that isn't contributor experience.
Yeah, but that's where we're at now, though, right? So there's like no change there.
I don't think that that's what people
Right.
were proposing.
Okay, all right. I just want to be clear on what are the next steps for me then?
So, George, I feel like anytime you spend enumerating work that has to be done, but maybe you do not personally want to do, that is still valuable effort, because it helps us understand what is the work that is currently on our plate. And by enumerating the work, we can maybe find other people to do that. If you are explicit in spelling out what needs to be done, we can either grow contributors into doing that work, go find contractors to do that work for us, or see if there is some product or solution that can automate away that work for us.
Okay. And you feel that my proposed PR is not doing that right now? Is not?
I haven't had any time to look at your
All right.
proposed PR.
I feel like the proposed
Any
PR
action.
is taking out too much.
Well, yeah, I did that on purpose. Yes, absolutely.
I think it can be trimmed down and talking about specific Slack and how we don't own Slack, the moderation or the content, etc. And then maybe adding a line like what Tim's saying about SIGs own their individual lists content, say the content word.
I think I have that. Okay. All right.
But I mean, I think that we should still talk to steering about how we think that there needs to be another group formed. I mean, I think that conversation should definitely be had because it's a worthwhile conversation. I mean, the problem is I feel like they're going to say like, okay, well, let's get someone to run it and propose it. And then we all just kind of look at each other because none of us have any cycles.
Yeah, I'm just going to say
that's kind of like
steering's charter though. I kind of want to force them to like think about it though.
Yeah, I know, but I just feel like this has been like 6 months of a loop. Like,
yeah, that's why I want to bring it to steering. I don't even like, if you all want me to throw away the PR, I'm totally okay with that. If you just want me to do the one change, I could totally do that. That's fine. I just want to get it on steering's agenda that we need help. We need help to figure out how to make a thing to put stuff under. Right now, and we agree that Slack is a thing. If that's all we do and that's the start and it takes us another 6 months to figure out exactly what bits, then that's fine. I just want to kick the can down the road. I don't think we can solve anything like right away.
I don't know. I feel like we've already kicked the can down the road with Slack and then everybody like ran to the rescue of it. And here we are.
Yeah. That's why I want to make it I want to ask for like a time box forcing function to be like, Slack is not fixed. If everyone thinks that Slack is fixed, we just have 2 fingers in the dam instead of 1. That's the conversation I want to have. And
so where's the document that describes what a fixed thing looks like in lieu of Slack or a fixed Slack, right? Document the work. Document.
I got to jump, but please still talk. I got to talk in like 10 minutes. All right.
Okay. Well, we can reconvene because we're way out of time. So yeah.
Paris, are we doing the steering committee today? Oh, she already left.
As far as I know, the steering committee thinks steering is still happening. I think I got to go check. You may not have done a poll on the mailing list for quorum, so I'll go look. But I'm open for it.
And to add on the agenda, I just file an issue, right? Like,
I believe so.
Okay, I can ask my Tim what I'm supposed to do. Okay, cool.
All
right. Thank you, everybody.
Later. Thank you, LC.
Later.
For running.